So in the last video, I said I would do a rundown on how to turbo these motors. So that's what I'm going to do this video. So we're going to do the do's and don'ts, and then I'll break down each category: turbo, manifold, injectors, ECU. We'll break down everything, the parts you can use, what parts to use, what parts not to use, and everything in between. And then at the end, we'll do a price list on what it'll cost you to do it on a budget, and then another price list on what it'll do if you put some bit better parts on it. So that's what we're going to do. So here it is, the mighty TB42. So before we get started, I am no expert. I don't claim to be. This is just my research and what I've done over the years and what I like. So yeah, some of it's just my opinion on things. There's obviously people that are going to have a different opinion. That's fine. This is mine. And yeah, that's the way it goes. So like I said, I'm no expert, but this is just some of the things that I've found when playing with these motors. I've even written down a list so I don't forget as much as I would without the list. So a few good things on here. So we'll start off with the don'ts. So the don'ts. So do not slap a turbo on these with no tune or no supporting mods. That is the dodgiest thing you can do. That's a recipe for no more TB42. So do not do that. Don't keep the standard injectors in it and just up the fuel pressure to feed more pressure into the rail and feed more fuel out the injectors. That's not good. You can high flow the injectors, which was actually what was in this motor. They seem to work all right if you just like a bit of a budget, and they're just a standard injector. So that's one option, but we'll get into that. Don't keep the factory fuel pump. That's one thing that needs to be updated straight away. But again, we'll get into that sooner, but factory fuel pump straight in the bin. Make sure you have some form of intercooler or some way of cooling the intake charge air. This car did have no intercooler at one stage, but I had the water meth, and without the water meth, like intake temps, you'd see up 80, 90 degrees, which is just ridiculous. It's just too high. So you need some form of cooler, whether it's a front mount, whether it's the water methanol, a top mount with a fan, or whatever you might do. All right, so a couple of do's. We'll go, do avoid eBay parts as much as possible. There are a couple of things on eBay that kind of work all right. We'll get into that soon. But that's one thing, yeah, don't be buying like eBay pressure regs, eBay sensors, the eBay Wastegates, eBay turbos, the cheap ones, and things like that. But we'll get into that soon. And the main do. So if you have a carby TB42, the number one thing is to throw the carby straight in the bin. That's the first thing. Pull it off, slam it on the ground, drive over it a few times, straight in the scrap bin. We'll talk about turbo size. So this is something that's wildly debated, and yeah, like people giving their opinions on other people's turbo sizes is kind of irrelevant. You need to sort of work out what you're going to do with the car before you decide on what size turbo. So, you know, you need to decide if it's a street car and you're going to be drag racing commies off at the traffic lights, if you're going to be off-road racing, if you're going to be like a winch challenge car or a weekend warrior, or like a tourer or a tow car. So each one of them categories, for me personally, I can think of a different turbo that I would use on each of them categories. So yeah, the turbo size it's sort of hard to choose a good size turbo. But yeah, the number one thing is decide what your car is going to be used for and then go from there. A lot of people recommend like the XR6 turbos, the 3582s or the likes of that. Me personally, for what I like to do with my cars, they're way too big. I've been in plenty of cars running them turbos and they're pretty horrible to drive. So, you know, a lot of people are full boost by 2000 RPM. That's rubbish. Yeah, they're lazy, and they're not a revvy engine. You don't rev them to 6.5, 7,000 RPM. So you want the boost to sort of come in early. So yeah, for me, them turbos are way too big. Wouldn't, like if you had maybe a street car and you're just street driving it, that turbo would probably be all right. Or if you had an auto with a high stall in it, so you could bring the boost on a bit easier, maybe that could be an option. But for me, yeah, they're just too big. So I brought the wagon in here. Now this turbo is a Mamba TD06 20G. It has a 10 centimeter rear housing, which is like a 0.73. And honestly, this car is brilliant. I absolutely love it. There's not really anything that I would change on this car. It drives awesome. Boost comes on early and it stays on right to the top of the rev range. Like, it is awesome. So if I turn the boost controller off and had sort of essentially have no wastegate, it's got a boost cut in the ECU. So if it hits 18 PSI, it cuts out, but it can hit 18 PSI by about 1800 RPM to 1900 RPM. So it comes on super early. It starts to flatten out in the high 4000s, so towards between 4.5, 5,000, it flattens out, and then sort of drops off after that, which doesn't really matter. Like the limiter's at 5400, which is factory, and yeah, if your turbo's still making power at the limiter, it's just too big. So you can bring that rev range back, which is what this car is good for. So if you're someone who likes to just ride the rev limiter and likes the power at the limiter and you just sit on the limiter all day, that turbo's probably a bit small for you. But yeah, this car, it is just, yeah, it's unreal to drive. Makes good power, and it's smooth. It doesn't hit hard. It pulls all the way through the rev range. If you're looking at, yeah, like a budget friendly sort of turbo, like the Mamba or Kinagawas, they're the same. They're not too bad. Hypergear do good turbos. They're in Melbourne. And like there's another brand, Pulsar. They have like different size, like they do like a Garrett size turbo or Borg Warner size turbo, all sorts of things. And yeah, they're probably not bad for a budget as well. So the turbo, if you'd allow somewhere between 800 to 1500 bucks on a budget, and that'll get you a half decent turbo. Obviously there's things like, yeah, the Garretts or the genuine Borg Warners or things like that. If you want to spend 2.5 grand upwards, sort of, yeah, the turbos can get a bit out of control, but yeah, on a budget, they're the brands I'd be sort of looking at. Something in a Garrett size, something around like a GDX 3076, you know, with like it's sort of hard to pick a rear housing size, maybe 8.2, 101, I think they do, or 1.06 or something. Might be on the bigger side, but if I was going a Garrett, that's the size I'd be going. I'd be going 3076, Gen 2 with a 0.82 rear housing. If I had Garrett money that I was willing to throw at the car, that's what I'd be going with. And I like having the smaller side turbo because in the wagon, like seriously, I can do a full day drive in the high country. You know, just, you never really have to rev it over 3000 RPM. It's just torquey off the bottom, gets to 3, it'll pull the next gear. So that's why I like it. You don't have to rev it all the time. It can help with fuel economy as well because you're not revving the piss out of the motor all the time. I have been in other cars set up differently, and yeah, they're changing gears at 4, 4.5, and it's sort of surprising that it's always revving that high. So yeah, that's why I like it. And again, it's just me personally. I like it driving essentially, you know, like a diesel in the lower RPMs, but you got the petrol RPM, so you can get the wheel speed. That's how I like it set up. And in regards to fuel economy, I can sort of see anywhere from 14 litres per 100 up to 30, depending on what you're doing. So beach driving and snow driving and things like that use a bit more fuel, muddy driving and things like that. But yeah, sort of, you know, road driving or through the windy hills and up at the high country, it's actually not bad on fuel. I'd say in a high country weekend drive, it would average about around the 20 per 100. So maybe like 18 to 22 litres per 100 is what I would say it gets from like a full weekend trip, fully loaded high country drive. So I have a couple of photos here. So I'll just show you, I'll put it over the screen so then you can have a look with me. There's two dyno sheets here. One is of the wagon, how it is currently, and the other one is a mate's car. Oh, he used to own it, sorry, he sold it now. But pretty similar setup motor-wise. They both had front mounts, the Ford plenum, Haltech ECU, and LS coils and whatever. They're all pretty much the same. His motor had forged rods and pistons and a different cam in that, and mine's just a standard motor with valve springs. But anyway, I'll put it over the screen. So both tuned at Independent Motorsports in Morwell, and both on the same hub dyno. So the comparisons, yeah, quite relevant to each other. He's had the GT3582, and I had a 1.06 rear housing, the bigger one, off a Falcon or whatever. And yeah, mine's the TDO620G with the 0.73 rear housing. And if you have a look at mine, you can see we'll go off the purple line, which is 14 PSI and has the water meth. So even just for example, we'll go to 2000 RPM. The power it's making is 100 kilowatts. This is at the hubs. So you'll have a little bit of loss going to 35s. So 100 kilowatts at the hubs and about 550 newton meters at the crank. And then if you go across to the other car, we'll go 2000 RPM. It's making about 60 kilowatts and about 300 to 400 newton meters at the crank. So massive difference there at 2000 RPM. We'll bump it up to 3000 RPM. Mine's making about 180 kilowatts and about 600 newton meters of torque. And we'll go to his, and his is about the same, 180, 190 kilowatts with 600 to 700 newton meters of torque. So a little bit more torque at that RPM, but about the same power at 3000. And then obviously his skyrockets up from there. He's running 18 PSI, and yeah, mine was only 14. But that's the difference. So between 2000 and 3000, you can see the bigger turbo's a bit lazier. And then, yeah, mine's obviously packing a pretty good punch. And the torque curve on mine, you can see it sort of starts at 2000 and then, you know, starts sort of tapering off at about 3,800. And yeah, his sort of starts at, you know, 3,000 to 4,750 for 4.5, I'd say. So you can see the torque curve's further up in the rev range. The power's further in the rev range, which for me personally, that's what I don't want. So just a quick example there. The car was still awesome. I went in it and yeah, it hauled ass. It pulled like a bloody freight train. But yeah, it was quite laggy off the bottom. He was thinking about changing rear housings, but then he ended up selling the car. So anyway, that's just a quick example. And at the end of the day, they are a full drive. They are not a street driven bloody race car. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's a full drive. I like it set up for full driving. If you're doing technical stuff, having like a lot of lag, or you know, doesn't come on until later in the RPM, or it comes on super aggressive, is kind of useless for me. So I like to keep the power predictable and like nice and early, and power all through the rev range. So in regards to manifold, again, on the wagon, it's a factory TD cast, the 2-piece low mount. It's got the factory heat shield, and we've just welded the external gate flange on there to mount the external gate on top. So that's not a bad option. I think G Turbo do their own casting of the factory low mount. It's exactly the same 2-piece, just has G Turbo cast into it. So that's not a bad option for a low mount. The high mount manifold I had on this was the eBay special, which actually worked all right. It was on the car for sort of 4 or 5 years, and I just sold it, and it was still in pristine condition. The things you got to remember with the eBay manifold is to cut the relief slits between each flange. I think that helps a lot. So keep that in mind if you're using an eBay manifold. And if you got big power, something like 6 boost is not bad, big extractor style manifold, or Radius Fab. They make nice quality manifolds. Radius Fab do a log manifold or like a tune length manifold. So either one's good. What you got to remember is when you buy from Radius Fab, they do TD and TB manifolds, although they're the same flange pattern on the exhaust and the same sort of design. Yeah, they won't warrant a TD manifold on a TB if it cracks or whatever from the higher exhaust temps that you'll see on the petrol. So keep that in mind if you are buying a Radius Fab manifold. Yeah, make sure it's a TB one, or let them know when you're buying it that it's going on the TB, the petrol. So keep that in mind. And with the manifold, make sure you always use the factory TB42 Turbo gaskets. I've got some here. So this is what they look like. They're individual, there's a part number there. They're individual steel multi-layer gaskets. They come on the factory turbo TDs. Road Runner off-road are good for that. They're good for genuineness and stuff at a good price. But yeah, make sure you run them. Don't run the graphite gaskets because you'll be doing the job again. Same with the turbo to manifold gasket, make sure that's steel. The manifold to head gasket, use them gaskets. And yeah, steel gaskets wherever you can, way better with heat and pressure. Otherwise you'll be doing the job again. So while we're on the subject of the turbo manifold, things like that, I'll show you where to plumb the oil and water from. So at the back of the block here, under number 6, this is your oil feed. There is a blank cap in there. Just undo that. Either get your hose and like a male fitting on your hose and put it straight in, or do what I've done and it's a male to male, so then you can have a female on the oil feed hose. So that's good. The fitting size is 1/8 BSP. So that's real easy. Obviously your turbo's right there, so that's real easy to get oil from. Drain the oil into the sump usually. This is what I've done, or what I did do on my old motor. So just drain straight into the sump. There's a fitting there. I just had like a barb on it with a hose, but you can, there's kits you can buy to put like a dash 10 fitting on there, and you can have like a braided steel hose. Either way is good. I have seen people drain the oil on like a high mount turbo setup into here, your cam cover plate. I personally haven't done it, and I don't know if there's benefits to it or if it's bad or anything. I don't know, but I have seen it done. But anyway, I've always done it into the sump. So water, there's a few different options for water. I can't show you on this car, maybe I can show me wagon. So you can either tee into the heater hoses, which I can't really see, but the heater hoses, it comes along underneath here, factory, and then it goes up into your firewall, into your heater core, and then back out of your firewall and back into the block here. So I've seen people just cut both of them and put a T in it, and then just run your hoses over to your water. Or that's what I've done on the race car, because obviously I've got none of that stuff underneath. So I just picked up the fitting at the start of the back of the water pump there, ran the hose to the turbo, and then drained it into the back of the head here. That's easy enough on the race car, because yeah, I took a lot of stuff off that you don't need. On the wagon, there is a fitting right, where is it? Here. So underneath number 5, tucked under here, that is water. It's a 3/8 BSP. Where is it? Here. It's a block drain, but good to pick up water for your turbo. And then what I've done on my wagon, which I can show you, is from the turbo, it's actually this hose here, goes through here. This goes to the back side of the turbo, and I run it around and drain it into the top of the water pump. There's a T fitting there. That goes to the top of the water pump from the bottom of the thermostat housing. I can show you on this one. So this hose here has like this 90 bend in it. So I've just put a T in that out of the bottom of the thermostat housing, and then ran the two hoses, drained the turbo into that, and then drain it into the side of the motor here. So we'll talk about wastegates now. With the smaller turbo, you obviously need like a bigger wastegate to bypass more air, or exhaust gases I should say, because because of the smaller size turbo housing, it'll build boost quick, and then you need to bypass that efficiently. So I always recommend external gate. I've always ran external gates. Actually, initially in the race car I had an internal gate, which I did actually have one of them eBay turbos on this car when I first raced it, and with the internal gate it was too small, had massive boost spike issues and all sorts of problems. So chucked that in the bin and ran the external gate, which also brings me to the next point about external gates. Do not use eBay external gates, because I did when I went to external gate, and all it did was the diaphragm in the gate, when it built up boost pressure, it was just bypassing through the diaphragm, and that cost me, like the old saying, poor man pays twice. I've done it. That cost me like a bit of time on the dyno, and cost me another wastegate and all sorts of stuff. So buy a good wastegate straight up. On this motor, I obviously had the eBay Manifold, and it has the provision underneath for a 38mm 2-bolt gate, so Turbo Smart or the likes. I think GFB do one, and it just 2 bolts, and you can have a nice 38mm external gate under there. That is highly recommended. So external gate, like 38mm works fine. It's the same as I got on that car. They're both 38mm, but the bigger the better. Whatever, the bigger the gate is, the harder or the easier it is to bypass exhaust gases, and then the less restriction you're going to have in your wastegate. So could help reduce heat and things like that. Like GFB, Turbo Smart, they're pretty top name gates. Australian made, I believe, both of them actually. So good quality stuff. And if you need spare parts or anything like that, it's all easy to get. You do pay like a little bit more. I think you might be paying around the $500-600 mark for like a 44, maybe 50mm gate, but it's worth it. So you pay once, and then it's on the car. It'll last forever. And if you do need parts, they're easy to source, easy to change. So that's pretty much the basis of everything you do. Like, just do it once, do it properly. I've done this several times and not properly, and it just costs you money in the end. So if you are getting a manifold like 6 boost, have a provision, like I think you can choose the size of the gate port, like whether it's 44 or 50 or whatever, and it comes pre-made on the turbo. Then all you have to do is weld the V-band on it to mount the wastegate on it, which is super easy. If like the likes of Radius Fab, I think for an extra fee, it's like an extra $85 or something, they can add an external gate to one of their manifolds. So that's also something worth thinking about. Saves you doing it. Like, at least if they do it up there, I'm sure it'll be covered under warranty and things like that. But if you get it back here and hack it up, chances are it's probably not going to be covered by warranty. Like what we done on the factory TD manifold is just weld a bit of pipe on top and then weld the flange to that. I can't really show you because it's underneath the heat shield, but that's easy enough to do. It's well and truly worth it. So we'll talk about intercoolers quickly. Now this is where some of the eBay intercoolers work pretty good. There's 2 different styles, tube and fin and bar and plate. There's endless theories and research done on that. So if you're looking for the best cooler for what you want to do, just research bar and plate versus tube and fin. I run the tube and fin on this car. It's just an eBay one. It seems to work awesome. I have had the intake temps down at 0 before, which is just awesome. So for an eBay cooler, it actually works pretty good. To find out the proper efficiency of it, you sort of need a pressure gauge before and after to monitor pressure drop, and then intake air temp before and after as well to 100% test it. But yeah, I haven't done any of that, and the things that I have done, obviously I do have intake temp sensor, but I don't have pressure either side. But yeah, that seems to work very efficiently. The others, if you're going to spend big money, PWR or Plasma Man. I believe Plasma Man's Australian made, the more expensive stuff. I'm not too sure about PWR, could be the same. I haven't done really any research, so check that out for yourself. But their coolers, yeah, upwards of $1,000. I just wasn't willing to spend that money on something like this, maybe on the Skyline when I get to that. But yeah, as far as eBay coolers, they seem to work all right. The sizing of these coolers are 300 by 600 by 76. It's a pretty generic size. If you just typed in intercoolers on eBay, that's pretty much the size it'll pop up. 2.5 inch inlet and outlet. You can get different orientations and all sorts. You just need to work out one that'll suit your car. I have managed to fit it with a standard size radiator, the aircon condenser, and the intercooler behind the grill. You do have to trim the grill up a bit, and if you can see in there, I had to notch the bottom of the grill out here, cut out that to go through, but it fits in there. It is pretty snug, but like I said, if you've been watching for a while, when I built that bar, I made it so the grill can come out and the intercooler can come out without taking the bar or anything off. So it does fit, it is snug, but it still works well, and it looks so much better with the grill on it than without the grill. So you can get them to fit. As far as mounts, I suppose I'll show you the mounts. Just a bit of flat bar that's bolted between the two top ones, and then tabs welded to that pick up bolts in the radiator support. So that's pretty easy to mount. You get rid of the aircon fan as well, and there's a bonnet brace here. Get rid of that too. The bottom mount is exactly the same, except there's just a single piece of flat bar welded in the center, and there's a factory bolt hole in the bottom of the radiator support there. So it's just mounted exactly the same. 3 bolt holes. It's pretty solid, so that's all pretty straightforward. So we'll talk about fuel pumps. Both of mine are running the Walbro 460. That's 460 litres per hour. Pretty decent fuel pump. They do make like a 255 and a 525, I think. The 255, I just never bothered to run it because, you don't want to buy the fuel pump, get your car on the dyno, and then it's running out of fuel and you have to change your fuel pump again. So 460 is just my go-to. I always had it in the Skyline, E85 safe and things like that. When you're buying the Walbro pumps, get them from a reputable shop. Do not buy them like off eBay or anything, because there's a lot of copies and they're junk. Back in the day, I'm pretty sure, someone might correct me, I don't know. Back in the day, it was the part number used to be printed on the fuel pump if it was a Chinese one, and it was like laser etched if it was a genuine one. I don't know if it's the same these days, but I just buy mine local from Independent Motorsports because I know he gets the goods. So yeah, I would avoid buying it off eBay. There are other fuel pumps, Dishworks and I don't know, whatever else, but something around that size is what you need to be using. And it's probably a good idea to upgrade the wiring to the fuel pump, which I haven't done in my wagon, but it's on my jobs list to do. So what you can do is use the fuel pump power wire that goes to the back, use that to trigger a relay, and then run its own separate power wire to the fuel pump, like a heavier gauge wire. So that's a pretty simple way of doing it. It's been done in the Skylines for years, and I'll be doing the same in that. So that's pretty simple stuff. Fuel pressure regs, I've got one right here for my wagon. It's a ProFlow rising rate fuel reg, and then in the race car, what is it? It's a Fuel Lab one mounted just there. So they're both rising rate fuel pressure regs, and the reason why you need rising rates is You set your base fuel pressure at idle, whatever, it's like 43 PSI, I'm pretty sure. Someone will correct me, I suppose, but I'm pretty sure it's 43 PSI. And then, yeah, you feed a boost line into the fuel pressure reg, and then as boost increases, it increases the fuel pressure. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure if it's 1-to-1. That's probably not a bad question to research. Whether it's, you know, 1 PSI boost equals 1 PSI fuel pressure. Not 100% sure on that. It could be 1-to-1, because essentially your injectors, when boost pressure comes in, your injectors have boost pressure like essentially pushing against them. So it needs more pressure to feed the fuel in. So that's the reasoning behind that. If it was non-turboed, you would just set your base fuel pressure and make sure it is the same throughout the whole rev range. So quick talk about the clutch. On the race car, which I put in not that long ago, it's an NPC Viper clutch. It's their clutch and flywheel combination. It's pretty, I mean, it's not too bad, I suppose. It's $1,400 or whatever. You can buy just the clutch without the flywheel, but it's not rated to as high as power output as it is with the flywheel. I was running a Exceedy Safari Tough heavy duty. We did start to slip it, but that could have been from the rear main. I'm not 100% sure, but that clutch is still not too bad. That's the clutch I'm running in the wagon. So if you don't want to spend $1,400 and you're not looking to make like a heap of power, the Safari heavy duty is not too bad. But make sure if you're buying it, because they do a Safari Tough and then a Safari Tough heavy duty, and there's like a $200 price difference. So the Exceedy Safari Tough heavy duty is around the $800 mark to $850. So yeah, like I said, that's what I'm running in the wagon. It seems to be, the pedal feels nice, everything works well. So if you don't want to spend, yeah, the $1,400, I'd be recommending that. Or if you don't get the flywheel with the MPC clutch, it's about the same. I think it's about $900. So if you want to just yeah, do it once, do it properly clutch, $1,400 is going to sting you, or yeah, 900-ish for the ones that aren't as good. One thing to remember when you're doing a clutch, every time you do the clutch, change a rear main, use a genuine seal, and put a spigot bush in it and a new clutch fork bearing, which usually that all comes with the clutch kit. Maybe not the rear main, but yeah, make sure you do the rear main. That's always just a given. You'd hate to put it back together and then have a rear main leak in 5,000 Ks, and then you've got to pull it all back apart. So solid advice there. If you got to pull the box out, change everything while it's there, and make sure that your pedal's adjusted properly. So actually I've got it right here. Make sure you adjust, there's a rod behind the master. There's a rod here that obviously is connected to your pedal, and that's got an adjuster nut on it. If you can see that. So some clutch companies specify a distance that the head of that rod has to be out to work with their clutch. And I'm speaking from experience from the Exceedy clutch. I had to run like a ruler or a straight edge across the front, like down there, and then run feeler gauges behind it and get the correct depth for the rod. So keep that in mind, like read the instructions when you get the clutch, set it up properly, because yeah, if you got not enough free play or too much free play, yeah, both will cause dramas. And my bloody throat's starting to get sore, I'm talking that much crap, so I'm sure everyone's sick of hearing my voice by now, but we're not done yet. So we'll talk about ECUs. So budget friendly ECU is a Nistune. So what you would do is pull out your ECU, send it over to Nistune. I think they're in South Australia. They put a chip in it and it just leaves the factory tune on it, and then they send it back to you. That's around, from memory, when I last had it done, it was around $400. Really good option. I would even be, if I had a non-turboed one, I would be Nistuning the computer and doing a couple of things and getting it on the dyno just to maximize the motor's power output and benefits. So yeah, Nistune, not a bad option. The most popular one seems to be the Haltech 750. So the Haltech 750, if you are running the standard, like if you have an EFI car, they do a patch loom, so it goes from the factory harness, and then the loom, it's like maybe a foot long, and then the loom plugs into the Haltech ECU. It's actually brilliant. So awesome from Haltech. That way you can use the same computer, like they can sell the same computer all the time, which also makes it easier for you to change computers between cars, because the older ones, the Platinum series or the Sport series, they had like car specific ECUs, so yeah, you couldn't swap them between cars. But if like what I was doing with these two cars for years is I just had one 750 and they were both wired up for 750s, and I would just swap the ECU between cars because it is probably the most expensive bit. And yeah, if you're gonna spend big dollars on ECU, it's actually not a bad idea. Even like, yeah, if you wanted to park the car out, or if you wanted to, you know, I could put that 750 out of the Patrol and put it straight in the Skyline if I went that direction, and save a bit of money there. So that's something to keep in mind. But if you got it like a carby model, or you've got no loom, you can do what I've done to the race car with this, what I showed in the other video. That's all that runs the car, as well as the coil harness there. It's all pretty easy. There's not much to it. Haltech, you can buy like a different levels of harnesses, like a basic one and a premium one, I think it is. So you can go like a premium harness, has its own fuse box, has all the stuff labeled. All you have to do is run it out and chop it to length, and then put plugs on it and things like that. And they have all the wiring details on their website, and their tech support stuff is awesome because Haltech is Australian made and they started in Australia, so they're awesome to deal with, quality product. So yeah, that's obviously what I did to this. And yeah, if I bought another carby car, I would be yeeting the carby straight into the bin and doing like a standalone loom, which just makes it easy. Like you have your car loom then with your lights and your wipers and all the stuff, and then you have your motor loom. So super easy. If you want to spend big dollars, I would go from a 750 to a 2,500. I wouldn't worry about the 2,000 Haltech Elite. I would just go straight to the 2,500, because the benefits from the 750 to the 2,000 aren't as much as the 2,000 to the 2,500. So for an extra couple $100, send it straight to the 2,500. You can do drive-by-wire throttle, multi-stage engine protection, multi-stage nitrous, and like all blah blah blah, going for ages. So if you're going to spend the bigger money, the 2.5 is the go. And then as far as that, I haven't really looked past that. If Motec do like a patch loom, but there's other ones, Adaptronic or whatever, and there's a few other ECU mobs. I think most of them you might have to do your own loom. So if you, yeah, for instance, if you had a car like this where you're making your own engine loom, one of them other ECUs could be a benefit, like Link as well. Link's a good one, but that's entirely up to you. Yeah, I like Haltech stuff. I like the software. For me, like, I don't know a great deal, but I'm still like learning about it, and the Haltech software is easy to navigate, easy to learn. And with the turbo setup, the one thing I would 100% recommend is a wideband sensor in your exhaust. So what that does is the wideband taps into the ECU, and it gives you live feed of your air fuel ratio, and then you can have a target air fuel ratio, and if there's discrepancy between the two, that you can turn on self-learning function in the ECU. So if your tune's a bit out, the more you drive it, the more the computer will essentially tune itself to the target table, and you cannot do that without a wideband. So I would just straight up, wideband, and the electronic boost controller as well. So the electronic boost controller is awesome. It allows you to have multi-stage maps, multi-stage boost levels, because you can turn the boost controller off, change the duty cycle. You can do open, closed loop, whatever you want to do. So they're the two other things that I would just straight up be doing with a Haltech. And I would be going like LS coils, or some form of individual coil. Go coil over direct fire ignition. that get rid of the dizzy, which is what I've done here. So no rotor button or anything. The dizzy's only in there for the cam angle sensor. And this is off right now because I'm gonna hopefully get a cap, like a steel cap made, a stainless cap or something made up, just to get rid of the dizzy cap. Looks a bit ugly with nothing on it. But yeah, with the NIS tune, you can't really do anything different to it. It just allows you to tune the factory ECU. And the factory airflow meter, I have had it in this car. The factory airflow meter, we ran in like 11 PSI, and I'm pretty sure that's about the max you can get. You can go to like a R33 Skyline airflow meter or a Z32 airflow meter. And yeah, that gives you a bit more range. But yeah, the NIS tune's good for like a basic setup. And the good thing about the Haltech as well is it uses air temp and like MAP reference, so manifold pressure reference, instead of an airflow meter. So the airflow meter, you eat that, and yeah, heaps better. So one question that gets asked all the time is injectors. So we'll talk about injectors. There is a few options with the injectors. One of the options is, which is what I was running in this car, what I have been the whole time, is the standard ones, high flow. Independent Motorsport's done these for me. I think they're a little bit tricky to do. I'm not sure, I don't know how he does it. But I think you just buff the end plate off. Yeah, the end plate in there just reveals one big injector feed in there. I don't think the spray pattern's the best on it. Might be right for E85 or whatever. But not a bad budget option, I suppose, if you can find someone that's willing to do it. So that's one option. Now, some other options are, what I have in my wagon is they're from Expert, or however you say it, spelt funny. They're like, it was like a bolt-in kit, and it had 3/4 length Bosch injectors with a 14 to 11 mil adapter into the rail, which makes the injector full length, and plastic plug adapters. So we'll go through that. I'll show you now what you need to do with that, because I've got a box here with stuff. I bought these injectors. They actually, turns out they're too short, but that's going to work in my favor anyway. So these are 1000cc Bosch injectors. Now they're top feed, so a lot of people get mistaken between top and side feed. The TB45 is side feed and the TB42 is top feed. So top feed's better, way more options, way easier to find injectors for and whatever. So they do a half length, or a compact, I think they call it, a 3/4 length and a full length. So in order for them to fit in this rail, you need 3/4 injectors, and then you need these little adapters. So these are the 14 to 11 mil, because the rail takes an 11 mil, but these injectors are 14. So these are 14 at the top. So all they do is slip over the top of that blue O-ring, and then the other end of that adapter slips into the rail. And then what you need to do is this bottom O-ring, this black one, you need to take that off, and then you need to use the factory Nissan square O-rings. I've got it on my phone actually. You can buy them new if your ones are in poor condition. So I'll show you here. They're 14.7 by 8.5 by 4.8. It was like $4 for a pack of 10, or you can buy genuine ones, but they're pretty dear. I think they're like $6 each or something. So yeah, if you need new ones of them, there's the size for you. I think the part number was there, but anyway, Google it and that's what comes up. So yeah, replace this bottom round O-ring with this square one, and you're good to go. I'm pretty sure it's like maybe 2 or 3 mil shorter. So if you get a 3/4 length injector and put the half length to full length injector adapters on it, I think it's like 2 or 3 mil shorter maybe than the full length of these standard ones. So what you can either do is, if you bolt it all in and the injector's still loose, you need to come down a little bit. There's a couple options. Grind a couple mil off this, off the mounting face on the intake manifold, which is a little bit dodgy, but whatever. Or on these adapters here, where this green O-ring is, you could put on that face there, you know, put a couple mil O-ring on that just to take it up and put pressure on it. So these are shorter. Like I said, these are the compact ones. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna cut the mounts of the rail and then lower the rail to suit these injectors. So I'm doing that for one reason mainly, well, two reasons, because I can't be bothered buying new ones and selling them again. And the second reason is it fits nicer underneath the intake manifold, whether you have a forward one or the normal one. Fits better, and if you lowered that down, it's easier to fit your idle control valve, which I have on the wagon. But anything regarding the forward facing plenum, I'll link the video now because I've done a full video on installing that. So any information on the forward plenum is in that video. So I'll give you some part numbers. Yeah, the injectors, whatever, 550s or 525s I think they are, or thousands or whatever. There are other brands in that, Works and whatever else, but I'm just going off the Bosch stuff because that's what I use. So this is the part number you need, if you can see that. Yeah, injector extension, 3/4 to full length, 14 to 11 mil. That's to go from the injector into the rail, like I said. There are other things you can do, mill out the rail and change other stuff, but this is what I find the easiest. It's just, if you get all the correct stuff, it literally just, you pull the rail out, put the stuff in, bolt it back in. So you need the injectors and the rail adapters, and then you can get these plug adapters. So this is what I got on the wagon, if you can see that. It's a male to go into the female factory Nissan loom, and then the other end is a female that goes straight onto the Bosch plug. So easy as that. I've got the part number here, but same thing, that just plug and play stuff. Makes it super easy. If you can see this here, it's from Raceworks as well. Part number CPS 045. And yeah, it all should bolt in. So that's the same stuff I use here. All right, so actually we'll talk about the engine itself. Is there anything you need to do to the engine to turbo it? Essentially, not really. What I would recommend doing, if you don't know the condition of your motor, or you don't know how many Ks it's done, or you don't know if the head's ever been off, I would recommend pulling the head off, getting the head checked, putting heavy duty valve springs in it. Crocams do one. I think they actually use RB30 heavy duty valve springs. So valve springs, get your valves checked out, the guides, stem seals, your seats and everything, get the head crack tested, all the stuff. Put a brand new genuine TB42 gasket in it, or if you know how to do the TB45 gasket, you just got to drill one hole, but I don't have one here to show you, and I don't really know exactly what you have to do. I'd have to research that myself. So genuine gasket, whether it's a 42 or 45, and genuine head bolts. I have heard of people, I've personally heard of people, you can go down the bolt shop and get like 12.9 grade high tensile cap head screws and use them instead of head bolts. This is stuff that I would probably have to research, but they may have a higher torque setting over the head bolts. You might be able to get a bit more torque down on the head. So that's something you can check out, but I have heard of people doing that. So yeah, there could be potential benefit using 12.9 grade cap head bolts from the bolt shop, but that's probably a little bit of research you'd have to do yourself. I know there's people that have done it, and that would be the route I would be going if I ever had to pull the head off, like the wagon or whatever. That's what I'd be doing. But if you're going to run any more than like 10 psi, which most people do, the valve springs definitely need doing. So that's one thing. At least, like, you know, pull the head off, the head's fresh, valve springs are fresh, you've got all new gaskets on your intake manifold. You can check out the condition of your cylinders, any scores or anything like that. So that's a not bad mod to do, and especially if you got the exhaust off already, you know, you got the radiator, you got everything out, it's really not that much work to pull the head off. So do that, get it all together, put all your turbo stuff on, fire up, then it's ready to be flogged the piss out of. Here's a part number I use for the valve springs, and they're crow cams. So I hope that covers most things. There are other things like blow-off valves, which this car had, but I took it off just because, no real reason. You want to fit the biggest air box you can. These truck ones, they're 4-inch in, 4-inch out, and a big filter. They work well. I actually have the same in both cars as this one here, they're the same. And yeah, there's other things like you got E85 and water methanol and things like that, but if you're in that far, then you're sort of going to have half an idea about all this stuff. So this is just like a basic guide on everything you sort of need to do to set up the motor for the turbo. We will go through a budget and a reasonable cost setup straight after this. I'll get back home, do a bit of research, get some prices, and yeah, work out a rough cost on how to set one of these things up. So stick around for that too. So we'll do a quick breakdown of like a price list and roughly what you would pay to set up like a basic and budget setup that's still good and going to last. There's a difference between basic and budget and cheap crap and something that's still going to last. So pretty much how my wagon was set up when I first turboed it years and years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. So we'll run through a quick price list and some parts. So if you run something like a Mambo or something along those lines, you'd expect to pay around $1,000, maybe a little bit more depending on where you're getting it from. So $1,000 for that. The manifold I am still running is a factory turbo TD manifold, which you'd probably pick one of them up secondhand for about $200. I'm pretty sure that's what I paid for it. Turbo Smart gate, the one on my wagon is a 38mm, so somewhere around $400. The eBay cooler, about $200. And then this is sort of subjective, but cooler piping and bends, I've got $500 in there, but you know, you could do it on the cheaper, or you might do it yourself, which will save a lot of money. The Bosch Injectors, around $700 with the plug adapters and the rail adapters. The clutch, XCD clutch, about $800. The Nistune ECU is around $400, and then Turbo Smart fuel pressure reg is about $250. Warbro fuel pump is $200, and an airbox $250. The exhaust is sort of subjective as well. You might do it yourself. You might get a nice stainless exhaust, but I've got $500 written down there. But that, yeah, give or take. And then I've got gaskets and other random bits like fittings and I don't know, you might put new engine mounts in it while you're there or whatever. So I've got $400 for that. And then the tune, which is also subjective. So I've got $800 down for that, but it may be cheaper, maybe more. So around about $6,600 to set something up that's pretty basic, but that's going to work well, make good power, and will last. Sort of the next step up from that is if you exchange a few bits. So if you went like a Garrett turbo, around 2.5, like a radius fab manifold, like the tune length one, $1,000. Change out the clutch for an MPC, $1,300 or $1,400. The change out the ECU for a Haltech with the wideband and the boost controller, and the patch loom if you're running the factory EFI car, that will be about 2.5. And then that's pretty much the only difference. Maybe some headwork. I've got headwork, so fresh head gasket, head bolts, and valve springs as well. So I'll just put $1,000 down for that, but that's also subjective, give or take a few $100s. So if you wanted to step it up and yeah, have like a really good setup, yeah, somewhere around 11 to 12,000 bucks is what it's going to cost you. That's give or take. You could save a lot of money, find some secondhand parts, or yeah, you could do a lot of it yourself. If you made your own exhaust and cooler piping and things like that, you could save a bit of money. But that's pretty much what you're looking at spending. If you're not willing to spend about $5 grand for a basic setup, I personally wouldn't bother doing it. You'll just end up running cheap parts and it'll cost you money in the long run, or the setup will be rubbish. You won't be happy with it. It won't run right and things like that. So if you are, yeah, if you're looking to spend cheap dollars, I wouldn't recommend wasting your time. So at the end of the day, it will cost you money, just like everything. If you're going to do engine conversion, it'll be the same. They're more expensive than people tell you, I can tell you that much. But yeah, it all depends on which path you want to go down. Pick a path and just stick with it. So whether it's engine conversion, whether it's doing like turbo on one of these motors. Me personally, I don't really like engine conversions. There's no engine that I'd really put in that I think fits well. So that's just me. And yeah, I think these motors, when looked after with a proper setup, they are bloody brilliant. Torque off the bottom. They're virtually indestructible if you look after them. And yeah, they're really not that hard to find another one if something was to happen. That wraps up pretty much will be the longest video I've ever uploaded. Far too long than what I usually like to upload. But even then, I've only skimmed over most of it. There's still there's probably hours, there is hours of information. I could speak for hours and hours on this stuff. So hopefully it gives you a bit of a basic understanding of what you need to do, parts you need to chase up. And then yeah, you can go out, do a little bit of your own research, and then go from there. So if you have made it to the end, you are one of the appreciated people. This would have been hard to sit through, me talking crap for nearly an hour. So hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully it's given you some value. I tried to put in as much info as I can while trying to condense it down into something that wasn't 3 hours long. So we'll see you on the next one.